You're not going to get everybody to be angels and do what they want to do. As a matter of fact, to be honest with you, that doesn't make a school colorful if everybody's just walking around and almost performing the way that an adult wants them to perform, so to speak. But you always want to build towards that. So any and everything that you do, you always want to have high expectations. No, I expect you to. So this is for our scholars. The reason why schools are built for children to learn. So everything we do, even though we always considering stakeholders, we're considering stakeholders and how those stakeholders are affecting our children, how those stakeholders have relationships with our children. So when we have those high expectations, we want to have high expectations for our scholars. So we have to like sift through some of those myths. What are those myths that come up all the time as to why children cannot behave? And you might have had conversations with people all the time if somebody's being quote unquote bad, and they always say, well, you know, they got emotional problems, they got problems at home. Oh, it's the parents' fault. You know, this child can't behave because look where they live, look where they come from. Oh yeah, well, you know, they don't have the resources everybody else have. So because they come from a poor house, that's why they're misbehaving. Oh, they have an IEP. Well, you know how scholars with IEPs, they're just bad. They can't learn and everything like that. So these are some myths that we just have to swim through a lot of times. And it's funny, these myths, somebody would deny that these are myths. But if you really go to a teacher's lounge sometimes and actually listen to people talk, even parents talk across the board, if you go on social media, these are some of the things that people are saying as to what's wrong with our schools today. So what we want to try to do with Global Academies, we just want to enlighten people. We always want people to learn. We always want them to be in a space to grasp and grasp a level of understanding of how behaviors work. And you might have heard this before. Hey, you teach them math, you teach them English, you teach them science. Well, guess what? You have to teach behaviors too. So what do? We have to make it easier for our scholars to behave, you know, put them in a position to be successful. We have to make it worthwhile for our scholars to behave. Whether we like it or not, sometimes they have to be motivated. Sometimes you have to give a scholar a sticker. Sometimes you have to give them a pencil to behave. There are some people that say, why are we giving scholars things that they should be doing anyway? That's just not how it works. It really isn't. But here's the key factor. You have to make it unpleasant for them to not misbehave. If they're in a situation and they're not necessarily following the norms, following the rules, what are the consequences look like? How do the rest of the other scholars feel? What are some things that, you know, is going to affect them to make them uncomfortable to say, okay, this is not a space that I really want to be in right now. So those are some things that we as a school always consider when we're establishing our norms. So we have two things. We want people to always know, our scholars to always know, our teachers to always know, number one, you are responsible for what happens in the classroom. You know, you can't point fingers, you can't say it's somebody else. You have the right to. Talking to our teachers, administer consequences. You know, that you have classroom management inside your classroom. But we always want our teachers to positively reinforce those behaviors. We want teachers to acknowledge negative behaviors. We really do, because we look at those as learning tools. We look at those as teachable moments. And we want teachers to acknowledge all students. I don't know if anybody on this webinar right now has been responsible, but sometimes you find yourself only teaching the children that are doing the right thing. Sometimes to get through the day, if a child is off task, if a student is not doing what they're supposed to do, as a coping mechanism, you want to ignore, you don't want to address, because of some of the things that may happen, the conflict that may happen if you address these negative behaviors. So a lot of times we say, you know what, I'm not dealing with this today. But we want to continue to acknowledge all students and let all students that they are part of the cohesiveness of the school culture. Number two, we want our teachers to know the most effective teachers assert their authority with students in a firm and positive manner. Nobody really likes people that yell at children, that call them out their name and everything like that. You always want to affirm children. You always want to affirm their behavior, but you have to stand firm in those expectations. Your interactions with your scholars, always have to be well considered and predetermined. And here's the hard part. The hard part is if you have 30 students, 25 students, 20 students in your class, you should already know that you cannot treat every single scholar the same. So when you're considering behaviors, yes, you want to consider Jennifer's temperament. You also want to consider, hey, Bobby keeps getting up out of his seat. What are some ways that I can alleviate and lessen that particular behavior? So these are things that you should already understand as an educator, even before you are actually building those, after you build a relationship with the scholars, you should already understand and know that these behaviors may occur. So you always want to consider everything. You always want to predetermine. You always want to make it purposeful. You always want to make your expectations known. And last but not least, you want to follow through on the consequences. So if you say, hey, if this behavior continues, you are going to have to go to the quiet table and you are going to have to write a short essay on this particular behavior. Let's just say that's your consequence for this scholar performing this behavior. The scholar performed the behavior one more time. Well, at that point, you now can't say, "Oh, okay, I forgive you." No, you have to give expectations.